Let's continue this discussion with Dr. David Ramadan, a former Republican representative from Virginia and professor of political science at George Mason University. Thank you so much for joining us, Doctor. One of the worst nights so far in terms of Russian strikes on Kiev. What is your assessment of the latest attack and also Ukraine's ability to now defend themselves?
Thank you for having me, Leanne. It's devastating. I mean, these attacks are unacceptable. The death roll and toll is unacceptable. And Russia has really pushed the envelope at this point. The problem overall, though, is very complicated. We saw President Trump yesterday practically recalibrating the role of America in the Russian-Ukraine war when the Pentagon hit the brakes on key weapons to Ukraine, and especially after that call with Putin, whereby the president wasn't happy at all with Putin's solid stand and not willing to come to the table. However, today's call with Zelenskyy got better, and therefore the United States is hopefully back engaged. But it's complicated. We're talking about a weapon freeze. We're talking about a humanitarian aid freeze, not just a weapons freeze. We are talking about a political division in Washington. We have the traditional Republicans, the Lindsey Grahams of the world that are supporting Ukraine 100% and continue to push the president to continue to prioritize American security through Ukraine and towards the negotiating table through force, through weapons, and through full military support for Ukraine. On the other hand, you got the MAGA movement, Trump's base that came in with him and pushed him to the presidency again, that are totally against total military intervention, specifically in Ukraine and Russia, because of this unexplained relationship or feelings towards the Russian that doesn't make any sense to most of us at all. And you've got the global fallout. I mean, you got the shift that reverberates far beyond Washington. Today, our European allies are under pressure. They have increased their part of NATO, but that's not enough, because that's just production and spending in their own countries, having to also put in money towards Ukraine. So all of this is the doing of Putin that is absolutely devastating, not just Ukraine militarily, but this whole new world order that we've all been working on and working through for the last 20 years or so, that Putin decided to just disrupt altogether. Not a good situation and very complicated. And unfortunately, we're going to continue to see a lot of Ukrainians dying. There are a lot of Russians dying as well. But their country started this war, and the Ukrainians are defending themselves.
Doctor, Poland's foreign minister has messaged President Trump on social media today saying Putin is mocking your peace efforts, something that he's come out with. Do you agree with the sentiments? Because you just touched on it there. We saw that phone call between President Putin and President Trump, and then this large-scale drone attack on Kyiv. Is that sentiment correct?
Not necessarily. It is defying and it is challenging the presidency and the power of the United States, represented by Donald J. Trump today. So I wouldn't say that they are making fun, or I can't remember what the exact word that he used, but it is more challenging to the United States. Putin certainly is challenging the United States today, certainly challenging the will of President Trump, certainly challenging how far America is willing to go, and betting on the fact that America will not sustain its support to Ukraine. That's what he is betting on. I don't think that's going to work out for Putin.
Now, what do you have hope for? Is a breakthrough actually possible from the recent telephone conversations between President Trump and Putin, and of course Trump speaking to Zelenskyy today, which you said almost seemed a little bit more positive? The US president told Zelenskyy he wants to help with air defense due to Russian attacks. That's according to reports we're getting on that telephone conversation. So is a breakthrough likely in this very complicated situation?
I wouldn't call it a breakthrough, unfortunately, Leanne. I think we may see a continuation again of American support at a lesser level than it was before. Remember, up till this point, the United States were still spending or executing, the administration was executing the spending that was put together by Congress during the previous administration. So there was something like $60 billion that the previous Congress had dedicated for Ukraine. And what we were seeing was the delivery of that money and that weaponry that had been put together in the previous administration. This new Congress, and with the new big, beautiful bill, as supposedly it's called, that passed just yesterday and will be signed today by President Trump, that level of support is not appropriated there. So we're going to see continuous support because America cannot stop supporting Ukraine. However, it may not be at the same level. And this is now the time for Europe to step up so that they can fill in the gap, because the gap is certainly going to exist.
So I want to talk to you about Europe getting involved and filling that gap. Keir Starmer and Emmanuel Macron will be holding a summit in London on Ukraine next week, since the US-led talks have pretty much stalled. Are European allies feeling more pressure to step up and help? Obviously, we saw the NATO defense spending, that's now gone up to 5%. But are these just talks about talks, or is anything concrete actually happening from the European Union and NATO?
We haven't seen much action yet, but I think they're going to need to do so. Again, they were depending mostly on U.S. support and financing the war to a certain extent. But now that the gap is going to exist, they're going to have to step up. It is in their backyard. The European Union is going to be challenged if for some reason Ukraine loses this war, because then Putin will go beyond, they'll go into other European countries, some that may be part of the European Union, certainly NATO members. Poland is certainly a target and on the list. Therefore, there's more at risk for Europe today than there is for the US. And with the America First agenda of the United States, this is going to be on Europe to move up and do that. The challenge is really balancing strategic interests with moral commitments. How the U.S. chooses to lead or step back will shape not just Ukraine's future here, Leanne, but the credibility of the West as a whole. And what Europe decides to do to fill up that gap will also decide the credibility of the West and credibility of Europe and their strength with or without the United States. Those of us in the United States that are in support of Ukraine will continue to do our best to push. That is the majority of the sentiment of the academic world and the political world and the conservative world and the liberal world, with the exception of the MAGA segment of the Republican Party. That will, in my opinion, ensure continuation of support of Ukraine, however, not to the same levels that we've seen before. And again, I hope that the Europeans step up and fill up that gap.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the Europeans are trying to do their best to keep Donald Trump on side and to step up to that further defense spending. But I just want to ask you a final question, if I can, Doctor. Is this the most powerful Donald Trump has been in his second term as president, after we witnessed that mega bill being passed yesterday? Of course, the ceasefire between Israel and Iran that we saw too, and also the potential ceasefire between Israel and Hamas that could possibly be, hopefully, tied up soon.
Most certainly. The Donald Trump version of his second presidency is quite a bit different than the first. One, he's got the majority in Congress in both the House and the Senate, and that's why he was able to push the budget bill, what he calls the big beautiful bill, through, regardless of not a single Democrat voting for it. He's got a cabinet that is fully MAGA, fully Make America Great Again type of individuals that will not and will challenge at all the president, but will absolutely apply and push forward his agendas and his beliefs more than 100% in some cases. They try to overdo him to a certain extent. And he's got the experience of what he went through the first. Look, the first President Trump, or 45, the 45th president at the time, didn't know what he was doing. He was new to policy. He was new to politics. When he won, really, he didn't know that he was going to win. The campaign became, okay, I ran for president, and oops, I made it. I'm in. That has changed over the second time, and he sat outside of the White House for 4 years, preparing of what he wanted to do in his second round. Now, in his second presidency, he is more powerful than ever. And now he is fully exercising or even going beyond the powers of the presidency. And that's what we're seeing with his executive actions, that he is challenging the limits with. Most of those will continue to be executed and applied. Until they are the challenges to those executive orders will make it through the Supreme Court. Some of them will be stopped. We've seen some of them being stopped already because he's truly pushing the limits. He is exercising more power than the traditional limits of the powers of the United States president, of any United States president. Therefore, he is more powerful than he was before, and arguably today more powerful than any other president, because he is pushing the limits through executive orders and pushing beyond those red lines that other presidents had abided by. He's not abiding by.
Dr. David Ramadan, former Republican representative from Virginia and professor of political science at George Mason University. It was great to have your insights. Thank you for joining the show.
Thank you for having me, Leah.